You know, we talk about the cloud and AI like there's some kind of magic, right? They're weightless, clean, and just out there somewhere in the ether. But the truth is, this digital world has a very real, very physical body. And right now, there's a hidden war being fought over it. A war for power, for control, and for the actual ground beneath our feet.
So let's just ask a really simple question that gets complicated fast. Where does AI actually live? Because it's not in a cloud. It lives in millions of servers, packed into these massive buildings that have an absolutely insatiable appetite for two things: electricity and water. This is the story of that physical reality and the battle to control it.
Okay, let's break this down. On one side, you've got the marketing idea of the cloud. It's ethereal, abstract, all software and algorithms. But on the other side, you have the physical grid. We're talking concrete and steel, power-hungry reactors, and thousands of miles of actual power lines. This is the core conflict, the clean, shiny idea versus the gritty, demanding reality. And in 2026, that conflict just exploded.
So our first stop is the legislative frontline. This is where the battle lines were first drawn, not with soldiers, but with policy. And it's a super high-stakes struggle between the federal government's huge AI ambition and individual states just trying to survive.
Man, things escalated fast in early 2026. On January 9th, the Department of Justice sets up an AI litigation task force. Then, by March 11th, the Commerce Department is told to make a list of onerous state laws it wants to get rid of. And then, boom, on March 20th, the White House drops its national policy framework for AI. It was basically a declaration of intent to steamroll local rules and fast-track a national build-out no matter what.
But here's the thing. The states aren't just rolling over. Take a look at Maine's House Bill 307. This is a direct shot back. They put a moratorium on any new data center that pulls more than 20 megawatts of power. And why? Well, as the bill says, Maine already has some of the highest residential electricity rates in the entire country. Their lawmakers are just trying to protect their own people from having to foot the bill for AI's insane power demands.
And what's the federal government's response to states like Maine? It's this number, $21 billion. That's how much is in the federal broadband fund, and the administration is using it as a cudgel. They're threatening to withhold it from any state that keeps what they call onerous local laws. The message is pretty simple. Get in line or your funding gets cut.
So with the public grid totally strained and states fighting back, the tech giants made a really radical pivot. They basically decided, hey, if we can't rely on the public grid, we'll just build our own. And this brings us to their wild corporate response, a strategy of total energy independence. They have a name for it, BeYONCE. And yeah, that stands for Bring Your Own New Clean Energy. And it is literally what it sounds like. Instead of hooking up to the public grid, these AI companies are now building or bringing or buying their own private power plants. They're effectively turning themselves into their own utility companies. Now, publicly, this whole move was framed as a really consumer-friendly gesture. The White House even brokered this ratepayer protection pledge, where giants like Microsoft and xAI promised to pay their own way. The idea, of course, was to shield you and me from rising energy costs. But, well, as we're about to see, the reality on the ground looks a little different.
Okay, maybe the most unbelievable example of BeYONCE in action is this. Microsoft is funding a $1.6 billion project to restart the Unit 1 reactor at 3 Mile Island. And get this, to make it immune to cyber attacks, they're using its original 1970s-era analog air-gapped controls, like actual knobs and dials. But here's the kicker. Even if they get the reactor ready by 2027, the grid upgrades needed to actually connect it might not be finished until 2031.
But the strain on our infrastructure isn't just about massive hardware. No, there's a hidden risk that's multiplying the demand, a kind of technical rot that's brewing inside the software itself.
This quote from a technical audit says everything. Developers are using AI to write code more and more. They call it vibe coding. And the result is often code that works, but it's incredibly bloated and inefficient. It's, as they say, syntax heavy, but it's structure light. And that creates this massive invisible drain on computing power.
And the risks here are, well, they're huge. These inefficient pieces of code act as invisible load multipliers, causing these totally unpredictable power spikes on the grid. It also creates what's called a debugging gap. It's a trust paradox where developers are deploying code they don't actually understand. And even worse, attackers are using techniques like slop squatting to sneak malicious code into projects built by developers who just blindly trust what the AI suggests.
And if you want to understand the scale of this problem, just look at this. A recent study found that a staggering 40% of code snippets generated by AI contain security vulnerabilities. This is not a small fringe issue. This is a systemic weakness that's being coded directly into the backbone of our new digital world.
So, what is the real-world price for this infrastructure war and this hidden software crisis? That brings us to Chapter 4, the toll. A toll you can measure in two very simple things: heat and cash.
First, let's talk about the heat. A landmark study found that the land surface temperature around data centers increases by an average of 2 degrees Celsius. They're creating what scientists now call data heat islands. The cloud, it turns out, has a measurable temperature.
And this isn't just a local thing. That same study estimates that over 340 million people across the globe are already affected by the warming effect of these data heat islands. This is a direct physical impact on communities everywhere.
And then there's the cash. Because despite all those corporate pledges to pay their own way, someone is paying. In Virginia's Data Center Alley, the typical residential customer saw their monthly bill from Dominion Energy jump by $11.24 in 2026, all to cover the cost of grid upgrades for the data centers.
And Virginia's not an outlier, not at all. We're seeing a national pattern emerge. In Georgia, a huge grid expansion is putting upward pressure of over $20 a month on family bills. In Ohio, rates are projected to climb by over $10 by 2028. The bill for the AI boom is coming due, and it's being sent directly to residential mailboxes.
So when you put all these pieces together, the federal power grabs, the private nuclear grids, the hidden costs, the physical heat, a pretty startling new picture comes into focus. We are witnessing the rise of the digital city-state.
Just think about what defines these new enclaves. First, they have energy autonomy, their own private, air-gapped nuclear grids. They have a kind of legal immunity, thanks to federal safe harbors that just nullify local laws. They use their massive fiscal leverage to just bypass state regulations. And they even have physical thermal borders, defined by that 2 degrees Celsius temperature difference between the enclave and the community right next to it.
So in the end, what this all shows is that the cloud isn't just a network of computers. It's a new kind of territory. It is actively building its own world with its own laws, its own power, and its own climate. And that really leaves us with one final and I think urgent question. As these new walls go up, who gets left outside?